In example 11, we're going to find the sample variance and the sample standard deviation for the data in set 2 in this table right here. So for this data right here in the second row. All right, so let's notice that our variance formula is right here, and then the standard deviation is just the square root of that variance. So let's deal with this formula. Now, within this formula, there are two very important things I want you to note. We want to find the sum of all of the x's squared, so every piece of data squared and summed up. And then we want the sum of the data itself. That's our sum symbol followed by x, and once we have that answer, we will square it. So notice how those are different. This one where we're going to square each piece of data, and then we're going to sum it up. And this one, we're going to sum up all the data and then square that answer. All right, so to do that, I have transferred this data to another page. So let me go over there. And we're only dealing with data set 2, and I made too many columns here, but that's okay. In my first column, I am going to put all of the items that are in data set 2. So 46, oops, and I'm going to put them in different fields, 37, 40, and we'll just go straight down in that fashion, putting all the data into their columns. And of course, you can do this on paper as well. All right, now I'm going to make a second column, and this column is going to be my x squared column. So I'm going to call it x squared. And what I'm going to do is I am going to square every single item that's in column 1. So I'm going to say 46 times 46, and that answer will go over here. And that gives me 2116. So I'll put right here 2116. Now I'm going to do the same thing with 37. 37 squared, or 37 times 37. And that is 1369. I'll put that right here. And now 40 squared, 40 times 40, which is 1600. And now we'll do 33 times 33. That's 1089. And 42 times 42. That gives me 1764. And 36, that's 1296. And of course, 40 times 40 again is 1600. And 47 times 47, that gives us 2209. And 34 times 30 is 1156. And finally, 45 times 45, which is 2025. All right, now once we've got these two columns, we're going to add both columns up. So I'll begin by adding all of these numbers in the x column, 46 plus 37 plus 40, all the way down to 45. When I sum up this column, I get 400. All right, now we're going to sum up the x squared column. So we're going to add 2116 plus 1369 plus 1600, all the way down to 2025. And this gives us 16,224. All right. So I went ahead and copied our formula from the previous page so we can pay attention to it as we fill it in. All right, so I'm going to write my s squared first. Now, of course, s squared is our sample variance, and then afterwards we'll get our sample standard deviation. Now, let's look on our formula and notice that the first thing it asks for on the top is the sum of the x squareds. So in other words, this x squared column, the sum of those, well, that's the 16,224. All right, so 16,224 minus. All right, now let's notice the second part of the top. Now we want on the top of this smaller fraction the sum of the x column, and we're going to take that sum and square it and divide it by the number in our sample. All right, so if we look at our x column, the sum of the x column is at the bottom. That's 400. We are going to take that sum and we are going to square it. And then we're going to divide by the number in our sample. Now be careful that you don't count that 400. That was the sum. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in our sample. All right, now there's the top of my fraction. And then on the bottom of my fraction, I'm going to have n minus 1. So I'm going to have 10 minus 1. Oops, except I can't type. All right, now let's continue with this calculation. So on the top, I'm going to go ahead in my calculator and do the 400 squared divided by 10. So now I have 16,224, and 400 squared divided by 10 ends up being just 16,000 in the calculator. And then on the bottom, I'll go ahead and subtract 10 minus 1 is 9. All right, now I've got to finish the top before I can do this division. 16,224 minus 16,000 is just 224. And divided by 9, I'll stick 224 divided by 9 into my calculator. And we get 24.88888 repeating. All right, now I suggest when you get things in your calculator that you take these out as far in decimal places as your calculator gives you. We'll see that by rounding off too early, you can have mistakes when you put it into your homework. And it also leads to less accuracy when we round off too early. So let's get the standard deviation. Now, to get the standard deviation, we're going to take the square root of our variance that we just got, the 24.888888889. All right, so let me find the square root symbol. So we're going to, if I can get in the box, take the square root. Not sure how many decimals I have there of that thing. I think I have the right number of 8s there. All right, so be careful when you put this into your calculator. Remember, you're taking the square root and not the square. Always with the square root, we should be getting a smaller number, not a bigger number. So be sure that that is what you get. And I get 4.9888765. 16. Now, of course, according to whatever your homework is asking for, 3 decimals, 4 decimal places, whatever you need to round to, you can do that at this point. Just make sure that you don't round too early when going from your variance to your standard deviation. And later on, we'll talk about how it's important to keep all of those decimal places as we do calculations that take things a little further than just the standard deviation. So keeping as many decimal points as we can is very necessary in these procedures.